Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a very special video coming to you from LibertyCon in Chattanooga. I wanted to film this video as soon as possible, so I am actually filming it from my hotel room while I'm at the convention, while it's fresh and while I can go ahead and get work done. And so if I have to talk a little bit softer than I normally would in my studio, so I apologize if it's a little harder to hear me in this video. And also, I apologize that I don't have my full video decor of my bookshelves because I have to work with what I have at the hotel. That being said, I wanted to let you know about what LibertyCon is. This is a science fiction and fantasy convention in Chattanooga. It's held about once a year. This is the 36th year that they've held the convention, and it is a tremendous convention where a bunch of authors and publishers come to talk about their books. They come to talk about the craft of writing, and they come to talk about what's coming in the future. A lot of the panels are panels dedicated on how to do this or how to do that, or why we do this in publishing, or they offer tips and tricks for how to publish this type of book or how to market your books. But there's also publishing panels where the publisher sits down and announces their slate of books for the next 6 months to a year. And we had a bunch of publishers attend this year, including publishers like Raconteur Press, Chris Kennedy Publishing, Canon Publishing, Three Ravens Publishing, and of course, a publisher that I'm very familiar with, Baen Books. And so with all of those publishers present, I felt it would be worth it to travel here and try to get all the news from those panels, which I think is going to be delightful. Those panels had so much news in them that if I tried to do them in a single video, it would be hours long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give an overview of all the panels that I attended at the convention. Now, let me tell you, I went to a lot of panels, not just the publishing panels, but I am going to have dedicated videos to the news coming out of the publishing panels from each publisher, and dedicated videos throughout the week. So look for those videos later this week. There'll be standalone videos that I'm excited to release and record as well. But let's go ahead and start looking at some of what happened, and I want to preface a little bit of what I'm going to say by saying that I had some time to sit down with authors and editors while I was at the convention. The people here are very nice. They are very generous with their time, and so I was able to actually sit down and have some conversations off the record with these authors and editors, which was really nice. I obviously cannot reveal what was talked about with those authors and editors, and just to provide some safety and don't want to get them in trouble, I'm not going to reveal who specifically I talked with, but there were quite a lot of authors and editors present, and I was able to actually talk with quite a few of them, which was really nice. And I'll say that these authors are very nice to fans. They are excited to see people who have read their book. If you go to anyone from these publishers and you have a book for them to sign, you will make their day. They are so excited. These are not the types of people that get inundated with fans asking them to sign things all the time. These are not the big names like Brandon Sanderson and Stephen Erickson or anything like that. These are smaller names authors, and most of them, the majority of them, are indie authors. And so if you bring your book to them, they are so happy to see you. And so I just want to say that these were the nicest people. They were very generous with their time, as were the people that ran the convention. The people at LibertyCon really treat audiences well, and I really appreciate that about them. And I was a last-minute addition to the convention, and so they still were very, very nice and able to work with me quite a bit. I will also tell you that some of the information at the panels I had wanted to record the panels, and just because of safety reasons, the convention said that they did not want me to record, which was totally fine, but I could take notes. And some of the panels, I was furtively trying to write down my notes and take pictures and things, and I just could not possibly keep up with what was happening at the panel. So some of my panel knowledge will not be full, particularly with like Chris Kennedy Publishing and Baen Books. I will not be able to cover every single book, but I'm going to try to cover as much as I can. With that, let's go ahead and talk about what happened on Friday. I left my apartment in Georgia around 7:30 and arrived in Chattanooga around 11. I actually wanted to do some shopping at a used bookstore called McKay's Books. And if you have ever been to McKay's bookstore, you know what a glorious location it is. I refer to McKay's Books as the funnest place on earth. I love Disney, but it cannot compare to the joy that I get going to McKay's Books. If you're a book fan, they have huge aisles filled with books, and they have a second story in the building just dedicated to like comics and records and stuff. So the first story, which is humongous, is dedicated to the books themselves, and it was a delight to be there. And I bought way too many books while I was there. I purchased about 20. I will cover all of that in what I specifically bought in a book haul later on. But after shopping at McKay's, I headed over to the convention, which was at the Chattanooga Convention Center, which is connected to the Marriott Hotel. And I got there around noon, and the first panel was at 1 o'clock, and that was the Meet and Greet the First Timers panel. And I'm going to, at this point, start really paying attention to my notes so that I make sure that I get everything that I wrote down from the event. This panel was a really fun way to get the audience used to the feel of how the panels would go, and the authors present had an opportunity to talk about their books and the publishing industry as a whole. There were particularly fascinating discussion about marketing books and the process of self-publishing that was really interesting. Even though it was called a meet and greet, the audience didn't particularly meet and greet with the panelists, but still, it was a fun panel to attend. The next panel that I attended was one of the publisher panels, where the nice folks at Raconteur Press had the opportunity to talk about their next year. This was surely the smallest and newest publisher present at the convention, and they obviously are trying to grow rapidly and trying to add new things to their current slate of books. I'll go in depth on all of the news from this panel in another video, obviously, but what I can just highlight here is there was one feature of their publishing plan that I thought was creative and also I thought was ambitious, and that was their 24 in 24 initiative. What that means is that in the year 2024, that publisher, Raconteur Press, published or planned to publish 24 anthologies or short story collections in 1 year. That is a ridiculous amount of short story anthologies. Most publishers do a couple a year, if that. Maybe, I think Bane maybe does like 5 or 6 a year at most. Certainly new ones at least, not 24. So that was good on Raconteur Press for that. They're a very small publisher. I will cover, of course, more of them in another video. But let's go to the next panel. The next panel I attended was a very sweet panel. It was the Bane 40th anniversary panel. This panel was really to talk about and celebrate the history of Baen Books over the last 4 decades. The discussion was heralded by Tony Weisskampf, who is the editor and publisher of Bane, and other authors were there like David Weber, and one of the longest-serving convention fandom people who attends all these conventions like Worldcon and DragonCon and stuff. His name is Ben Yallo, who is very familiar to the people at LibertyCon. He was also present and part of the panel. But this panel was actually cut short by a fire alarm that occurred in the middle of the panel, and so we had to evacuate the building, and then we had to wait for them to turn off the fire alarm and determine if there was a fire, which there was not. Everyone was safe. Everyone was fine. It was just, I don't know what specifically happened, but it was a false alarm. But yeah, that did cut about 10 or 15 minutes into the panel, so we didn't get as long a panel as we would have liked. But it was still a really sweet panel to attend. Baen does have a full publishing panel that happened on Saturday that I will talk about in depth later on, and of course in its own separate video. But this was just a little retrospective where Baen looked at the past. The next panel I attended was the Space After SpaceX panel. I have to admit, I only listened to about the first half, about the first 20 minutes of this panel, because I was hungry and I did not have a break in my schedule. From when I arrived at the convention center until I left the convention to go back to my hotel, which was at like 10 o'clock at night, I did not have a single break in my schedule. I was that busy, and I knew I needed to get food. And I didn't want to cut off the other panels. And also, I'll tell you in a minute why this panel was the right one to cut off. And so, no disrespect to the panelists involved. So I had to go and get food. And I had not had lunch at all that day. So I had basically been on the road since 7:30, which is when I had breakfast. So I was hungry. It was in the evening at this point. But going back to this Space After SpaceX panel, this was where it was hosted not by authors or by publishers or anything. This was actually hosted by scientists. And there is a scientist track and an artists track at the convention. It's smaller than the authors track, but it's still present. And anyway, this publishing panel was hosted by scientists, and these were professors and people who had worked at NASA, people who had worked at SpaceX, people who had worked at other space-related companies, and they were focused on talking about what could happen and what will happen in space exploration. The first 20 minutes of the panel was dedicated to talking about what technology do we currently have and where can that technology take us in the future. And they showed real pictures of the moon and Mars and Jupiter and stuff like that. And then they also showed us manipulated photos where they look at what would look like to start building infrastructure on the moon, and what would it look like to send an expedition to Mars, and how far an expedition can we send past Mars in the solar system. And so that panel was really fascinating. I am a huge fan of space exploration and looking at where humanity can go after Earth or beyond Earth. And so I thought this was a brilliant panel. However, about 20 minutes into the panel, they decided to shift from talking about what existing technology there is to what we would need to go further, to do better, to get better technology. And this is when the scientists broke out math and physics. And boy, are math and physics not my strong suit. I can talk about why we should go to the moon. I cannot tell you about how we're going to get there. And so I realized I was not going to get anything out of the math and physics portion of the panel. So that's when I slipped out. I was towards the back, so I just slipped out at that point. So again, no disrespect to those panelists. They were brilliant guys. They were really nice to listen to. I was crazy hungry, and also it was going over my head. But I really enjoyed the first half of the panel. I thought that was genius. The next panel that I attended was the opening ceremonies. And this is really odd because the opening ceremonies was not the first panel. You would think it was. I think that they host it later on in the day on Friday because they want to be able to let stragglers in, anyone who had a flight delay or anyone who couldn't get in right at the first panel at 1 o'clock. So they held it later on in the day. And this was the most full panel of the entire day, of all of Friday. This was a standing room only. It was in their biggest room at the convention. I think the majority of the people who were in attendance were actually present. I only think a few people weren't actually in the room, and that's because there were a few small things going on otherwise. Or people smartly realized that the bar and the cafe would be empty during this time, and because everyone would be at the opening ceremony, so a few people slipped out for that. At this panel, they had the Mistress of Ceremonies, Casey Azell, who I actually interviewed last year at DragonCon. Casey delivered a beautiful speech talking about why why LibertyCon is important, and the history of LibertyCon, and what makes it special, and all this stuff. And she did a good job with her speech. And they also had everyone kind of deliver a kind of a toast using this alcoholic thing. I did not partake in the alcohol portion of this, so my teetotaler status is still intact. They had a non-alcoholic option for those of us who wanted it, and it was a fun toast that we were able to get. And then one of the coolest parts of the day was that Gary Reinhardt, who is an author and editor, he works with some of the publishers there. He actually is also a musician, and every year they actually have him write a song for that year's LibertyCon, and he actually delivered the song this year. It was "Give Me Liberty or Death, or Give Me LibertyCon," and of course playing off of the famous Patrick Henry quote. And it was a delightful song. The audience sang along because it was a pretty easy song to figure out, and that was a true highlight of the day because that was just a lot of fun. After the opening ceremonies, I went to a panel titled "Sailors Tell Sea Stories." I don't really know what I expected out of this panel. I only went because one of the authors on the panel I'm familiar with, and I was like, oh, I want to see what panel she's doing. And so I went to this panel. I think I thought that it would be a panel focused on like authors who had been in the military, had been sailors, talking about how to write that in science fiction and fantasy. Because again, this is a science fiction fantasy convention, so I figured it was something like that. That is not the case. This panel was a bunch of sailors. It was 4 guys that were submariners, and then a woman who was in the Navy on a boat. And the 5 of them were telling funny stories from their time in the Navy and their time at sea. And these were just funny things, like when they would prank their executive officer, to when they would get in trouble with a 3-star admiral, to when they would go to illicit locations and do illicit things. And as you can guess by a bunch of sailors talking, it was very off-color, but it was still a very fun panel. It was the funniest panel of the day. I was cracking up at the humor that these gentleman and lady presented. It was nonstop laughter. It was one of the funniest events I've ever gone to. So that was, even though it wasn't what I expected, it was delightful nonetheless. The next panel I attended was the How to Do World Building for Epic Fantasy panel. There wasn't any news out of this panel. It was just a bunch of authors who have written epic fantasy or sword and sorcery talking about the craft. And so this panel was really there for aspiring authors who are really interested in figuring out how to do world building. And I, of course, want to be an author one day, but as a book reviewer, I like thinking about how do authors work and getting in the authors' minds. And so to me, this was still a very valuable panel. And some of the authors that I appreciate, like Tim Akers, like Howard Andrew Jones, and like DJ Butler, they were all present on the panel. And so this was actually quite a lot of fun to listen to and watch at this panel. But again, not a lot of news out of this one. The final panel that I attended on Friday night was a publishing panel for Chris Kennedy Publishing. This was a long and massive panel that I attended with a ton of reveals. Just to show you how huge the panel was, Chris Kennedy Publishing has 6 imprints, which is like they're in like sub-publishers for a specific subgenre. Traditional publishers have these too, but he has 6 imprints, and he publishes about 50 books a year, which is about a book every single week. That is ridiculously fast for a self-publisher or an independent publisher. That is ridiculously fast. I was amazed, positively amazed, at how much that publisher is able to produce. They publish more than any other sci-fi fantasy publisher that's outside of the big five major imprints. So I was really excited by what they had to announce. And of course, I will have an in-depth video talking about all of the stuff they talked about, which was huge. They talked about movie adaptations that are coming down the pipe. They talked about a new series. They said, yeah, we have like this 20-book series. Here's the next 10 books in the series. And I was like, and they're all coming out in the next couple of years. I was like, that's amazing that you can do that. And this is very much like a shared universe place where they have authors writing with other authors and working in the same universes, and they had everything from military sci-fi to mecha sci-fi to fantasy. They had urban fantasy as well. They had kind of like alternate history type stuff. They had they had a bunch of different stuff published. So again, I'm going to have a full video talking about Chris Kennedy Publishing on a later day this week. But for right now, that was the biggest news panel of the day. And whew, man, is that going to be a long video to talk about. But I'm excited to talk about it. But y'all, that was just Friday. Everything I just described to you was just Friday, and this is a 3-day convention. Sunday's the least busy day because everyone's leaving on Sunday, but Friday, I mean, that was an insane amount of stuff to fit in, and I didn't even get to do everything I wanted to do. There were some panels that I had to cut because they were happening during the publishing panels, and I felt obligated to cover the publishing panels. But man, was there a lot of stuff to do, and that doesn't even cover all the people I talked to off the record. It was a big day. So I'm going to take a break, and when I get back, I will probably be in a different outfit because it'll be a different day, but I will be covering everything that happened on Saturday. Saturday was also a busy day, but it was not quite as busy as Friday. Friday, I went to, I think, like 8 panels throughout just the afternoon, whereas on Saturday, I attended 4 panels, 2 author readings, and went to some author signings, which were a lot less stressful or less involved. So not as many panels, much more informal day, and I, of course, for Saturday, that was the whole day. I to start out the day, I met some friends of mine, some authors for breakfast, and I also got to chatting with a few other authors and editors, which was really nice. And then after breakfast, I actually went and got my book signed by Les Johnson, who is a NASA scientist, and he also writes novels. And if you have the opportunity to read his books, you should, because he's a great author, and he's one of the people that's finishing up Ben Bova's Grand Tour universe, the last Pluto novel, and also Les and I, we've known each other for about a year, so we had some fun getting to talk again. And then I also saw other people like Tim Akers and Howard Andrew Jones and Joel Presby, and it was great to see all of them at their various signings and panels and stuff. And then after that, I decided to go to the DJ Butler and M.A. Rothman reading. And the way the readings work is you're in a very small room. There's only, about 20 chairs in there, as opposed to the panels where they have a couple hundred chairs, usually, the big panels. The small panels usually have like 50 to 100 chairs, but the readings, it's a very intimate thing. It's just the authors and a few people come into the reading, and the authors will read a chapter or two. And that's what happened is DJ Butler read chapter 1 of Time Trials, which is the first in their new series that they wrote together for Baen Books, and then M.A. Rothman read chapter 2. And then afterwards they took questions and answers. And it was really fun to get to see the authors read their work. And it was a good way for, if you've never read any their books, You can listen to the first 2 chapters from the horse's mouth, from the authors themselves, and you get to see whether you like it or not. And it was funny because there was a running joke during the panel, or during the reading, where the authors would get to someone who was supposed to have a very thick accent, and they would choose, they're not going to do this. And one of them tried, Rothman tried an accent, and after about 2 paragraphs, he was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. That was really fun. I really enjoyed that. It was very relaxed. It was just got to listen to some good writing. Of course, I've been meaning to read Time Trials ever since Bane sent me the book a couple months ago, so I'm really excited to get to it eventually, and this got me even more excited for it. The second event, which would be the first major panel I went to, was the roundtable discussion for the Salvage title universe. This is one of the shared universes over at Chris Kennedy Publishing, which I talked about, that publishing panel on Friday. They did a few small mini panels for like the Four Horsemen and for the Salvage title and for these other things. I only went to the Salvage title one because some of my friends, Marissa Wolf and Melissa Olthoff, they were both on the panel, and I wanted to go see them on the panel. And so I went to this knowing absolutely nothing about the Salvage title universe. I went in knowing absolutely nothing, and I left knowing a little bit more. We're in the biggest room in the convention center because I think they didn't know how many people would come to this panel, and so we were in the biggest place, and there were only about 10 people in the audience. So it was a very intimate discussion, but it was a lot of fun. That was a very just goof off, relax, talk about it, and I got to learn some things. And I bought 2 Salvage title books at the convention, so I have some starting points. I also attended the next panel. Well, actually, I should stop and say that the next panel on my schedule was the Canon Publishing panel. And I first have to apologize that I am not able to report any of the news coming out of the Canon panel because I missed it. This was because I looked at my schedule and I was being run ragged from Friday, and I was tired, and I also knew I wanted to get to the panel that was immediately after the Canon panel, and I didn't want to be sitting in the back, and I did not want to be standing in the standing room only for this panel, which I knew there would be standing room only. So because of that, I was not able to make it to the Canon Publishing panel. This is no offense to the people over at Canon Publishing. It's just when the panels are back-to-back like this, sometimes you just have to make a determination. And so I intend to look up more information on Canon Publishing later, but I apologize that I was not able to bring you the news from Canon Publishing. But the next panel that I did attend was the biggest panel of the entire convention, and that is the Bane Traveling Roadshow. This is the one that, if you come to LibertyCon, this is the reason you're coming to LibertyCon, to see the Bane Traveling Roadshow. Toni Weisskampf, who's the editor and publisher at Bane, she manages this roadshow, and it is a hoot. Basically, the way that this panel works is on the screen behind Toni, you see the pictures of the books, and then you see the artwork and stuff. And then if the author is present in the room, they will pull up the author on stage, or at least in front of the stage, and have the author give about a 1-minute spiel on what book they have coming out. And it was very similar to the Chris Kennedy Publishing panel, but Bane has been doing this for years, and they have refined it to a fine art. It is enjoyable, it is fun, it is refreshing. I love the Baen Traveling Roadshow. This is my second time at the Roadshow, because I actually went to the Roadshow back in DragonCon last year, but this was my first time at LibertyCon, which this was much more full panel, because at LibertyCon, like, everybody there is there for Baen Books. Whereas at DragonCon, there's people there for Bane, but that's not the reason you come to DragonCon necessarily. But it was the Bane panel, the Bane Traveling Roadshow, was delightful, and we didn't have a lot of news in the sense of, at the panel for the first time ever, titles were announced. That didn't happen a ton. Instead, it was showing the pictures and showing the covers of all these new books that they have coming out, and letting the authors give the discussion. And I think most people have not heard all this, so I am going to cover most of the books that Bane was presenting there, but none of it was news to me, because I'm in the business. I pay attention to a lot of their announcements. One announcement I will discuss real quickly is that David Weber and Jane Linscold have another book in their YA. I think it's the Sphinxian series. They have a new book in that series, and they revealed the artwork. And I don't think my picture came in clear of the artwork, but they revealed the artwork and revealed that that's coming soon. And there were a few other minor announcements that happened, and I'll talk about that fully in my Bane Traveling Roadshow video that I'm going to do separately on the channel later this week. And so after the Baen Traveling Roadshow, I went to the How the Romans Have Influenced Fiction panel. This was the panel hosted by, the moderator was Lydia Scherer, and you had a few, authors on the panel who have written fiction influenced by the Romans. And people like Howard Andrew Jones, the author of the Hanuvar Chronicles. You had David Weber, author of the Honor Harrington series, and you had John Ringo, author of the Live Free or Die series and the Last Centurion and a bunch of other stuff. And so the three of those authors were on the panel, and it was very interesting. If you're a history nerd, you would love it, because basically all they did was just talk about Roman history. And how influential it is. And so they lived up to the title of what the panel was. The problem was that David and John, if you get them in a room together, they will just talk forever, and you cannot stop them. It is so difficult. I'm speaking from experience with David, at least. So it was a little bit frustrating that they did not share the mic or let the moderator manage like she wanted to. But it was still a fun panel to get to listen to. The next panel that I attended, it was the last of the panels that I went to on Saturday, was the World Building for Science Fiction and Space Opera panel. This was a bunch of space opera and science fiction authors I'm familiar with, like Chris Kennedy, like Casey Azell, like Mona Lisa Foster, who I actually interviewed Casey and Mona Lisa on the channel. They were all there. Charles E. Gannon was there. And so this was a panel dedicated to talking about world building. And if you saw earlier in the video, I talked about the world building for epic fantasy panel. This was just like that, but with questions asked about science fiction. And a lot of people in the room were taking notes because they are aspiring writers and they want to write science fiction novels, or space operas specifically was the main focus of the panel. And I find this stuff interesting. There's nothing to report from this panel, but I find it interesting, and that's why I went to this one just for fun. And it was a good panel. I had a good time with this one. And of course, I got some of the authors to sign my books afterwards, which was very nice of them. And then the last event I went to on Saturday night was a reading. I bookended Saturday. I started Saturday pretty much. The first event was a reading. The last event was a reading. The last reading I went to was for Shami Stovall. I think that is how you pronounce her name. She actually follows me on Twitter. I follow her. She has delightful cartoons, if you've never seen them. But she also is a published writer. She's written about 22 novels. And so she had a reading, and I decided to go to that reading. And it was a lot of fun. But it was also a little sad because there were only two of us in the audience for her reading. But afterwards, Shami and I talked for quite a long time about publishing in the book industry and stuff. And we talked about her books and talked about my YouTube channel and stuff. And so it was really great. The one thing I hope that everyone gets out of this is that LibertyCon is so small that you are able to really get to know people, authors individually. There's a few people there that are kind of big names and they're a bit busy and you can't get to them as well. David Weber being one, John Ringo. They're the big names there. You can't just walk up to them really. But other than that, just about everybody at the convention is super approachable and super nice to you. And I just want to keep reiterating that because this whole convention has just gone so smoothly, and I really respect everyone involved. And so that was my last event that I did on Saturday evening. I had another panel on my docket to go to, but I did not sleep well Friday night. And so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to head home and crash. And that's exactly what I did. And so in a minute, I'm going to talk about what happened on Sunday. But that part of the video, I will actually be shooting from my apartment, from my studio, because the Friday and Saturday portions, I actually filmed at the hotel, which is, of course, why I have this backdrop that I do. But on Sunday, I can't report on it till afterwards, and immediately after the last panel on Sunday, I'm heading straight home. I'm going to shoot that part of the video, and then I will upload it. So, in just a few seconds, here's me from the future on Sunday. And I am back. It is Sunday. You'll notice I am back in my studio because after my last event on Sunday, I decided to drive straight home, and I filmed this part of the video, which is a little bit shorter, and then the video's going up on Monday, so I had to get ready and edit all of this together and stuff. So for Sunday, it was a very, very light day. This was already on purpose because the convention only goes from like 10 a.m. to about 4 on Sunday, so it's not as long. And also, there weren't as many panels I was particularly interested in on Sunday and things. And so the way Sunday worked was I actually slept in on Saturday because I did not sleep at all, barely on Friday night. And so Saturday I slept in a little bit, and then I got to the convention around 9. And at the convention, I talked to a few authors and got a few books signed from David Weber. And there is one person in the publishing industry who I just talked with for about an hour and a half at the convention. And I learned a lot about the business, and I love chatting with her whenever I can see her. So it was great to see her at the convention. I won't reveal who it was, but it was, if she's watching, she knows who it is. And I did all that. And then I did attend one panel on Sunday. But before that panel I mentioned, I got my book signed by David Weber, and I had brought a ton of books with me to the convention. Most of them were David Weber books. I brought like about 20 of David's, and so I brought the books with me, and I plopped them on the table, and he was shocked by how many I had. And usually the rule at these places is you have him sign a couple, and then if there's other people in line, you let the other people in line go, and then if he has time, you sign the rest. And at first, David's eyes got really big. He was like, "Whoa, you're really gonna have me sign all those?" And it was kind of fun. And we talked a little bit while he signed them, and he was very gracious with his time. And like a few people came, and I let them go in front of me because they didn't have as many books. But it was great to see David and to have him sign all the books. So I brought 55 books of my own to the convention. 17 of them I couldn't get signed because the authors were busy, or the authors were just not in any of the panels or any of the signings that I was available to go to, because I'm telling you, I was generally pretty busy, and it's not like I could just get everything signed. So about 17 of the books that I brought, I couldn't get signed. But I got 38 books signed. Again, like most of those were David Weber books. But I also brought books for Joel Presby and Howard Andrew Jones, and for Jacob Hollow, and for Tim Akers and a few other authors. So I did get 38 signed, which is still pretty good. The next convention I go to, hopefully I won't have to bring as many books with me. I really hope so. And then also, I also bought some books and received some books. A few of the publishers and authors gave me some books at some of the panels. And then also, I bought a few books from some of the authors that I know or I was interested in buying books from. So I got about 10 books at the convention. Plus, I counted up that I bought 22 books at McKay's. So that's like 32 books just from one weekend, not including any books that a publisher has sent me in the next month, and also books I was going to publish in my local bookstores. So I am going to have a massive book haul. I don't know whether I'm going to do it as part of my July book haul or whether I'm going to do a separate one. I might need to do a separate one because it will be ridiculously huge. So we'll see how that goes. But that was all the books I got signed and stuff. And so the final panel that I attended was the Three Ravens Publishing panel, and that is a very, very small independent publisher. If you remember me talking about Raconteur Press at the beginning of this video, it's very much like that. They've been Three Ravens has been around about 4 years. So I think Raconteur has only been around for like 2 years, but Three Ravens has been around for about 4 years, and they do anthologies and novels. They only have a few authors that actually do their novels, but they've done a few anthologies as well. They're most known for this camping series. I forgot what the name of it, but I will have a full video breaking down the news from the publishing panel, and it was very informative. Again, these small independent publishers are just starting out, and they are trying to build up what they can do, but they can only do it if they get book sales and if they get audiences to know about them. A lot of people just don't know about Raconteur Press because they don't have as big a presence anywhere. A lot of people don't know about Three Ravens Publishing or even Chris Kennedy Publishing. There's so many people that have never heard of that either. So it's good that people like me and people like you attend cons. If you can go to a convention, try to go to a convention where these independent publishers are, because you really need to meet them there. But I went to Three Ravens Publishing. Again, that will be part of a video that'll be separate, that'll be dedicated to all the news from that and covering all their publisher. But that was the last panel I went to. As soon as that panel was over, I started driving home. It was about a 3.5-hour drive to get home, and my Google Maps took me on back roads, which was really curious. So it ended up being like 4 hours, but it was okay. I got home safely. As soon as I got home, I started unpacking my massive piles of books and sorting them and figuring out which ones were ones I already had, which ones were gifts, which ones were I'm sending off, and things like that. And I, of course, am filming this part of the video, and this will go out tomorrow on Monday. So overall, a very successful convention. I want to thank LibertyCon, for hosting such a tremendous convention. I really had a good time here. I would also like to thank LibertyCon for allowing me to come and take notes in all the panels. I was furtively typing notes on my phone, trying to keep up with everything. I appreciate them for letting me report on all this. I want to thank all the authors that I was able to meet and talk with, and I want to thank the publishers that I mentioned for hosting these panels and for being willing to talk with me. I met most of the editors there. And then there's also the dealers' rooms. I want to thank them for having them, because they actually a used bookstore came and ran one of the dealers' rooms. It was really cool. But that is all my news from all my vlog, I guess we'll call it, from LibertyCon, all the things I did. I know this is a massively long video. I apologize for the length, but this is what happens when you go to a huge convention like this. Not huge in people, but huge in things that happen to me. Anyway, you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm tired. So what were you most intrigued about in this video? Which panel would have interested you the most? Let me know any thoughts you have or ways that I can make these types of videos better. I wasn't allowed to take videos in the publishing panels, and I was just snapping photos real quickly when they were on the screen, so I couldn't take clear photos, so I couldn't fix that. But let me know ideas for how to make my vlogs from conventions better. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.